There is a story of Bodhidharma, came from India 2,000 years ago, maybe a little less, bringing the idea of Zen. And he left, the story goes, a document which is seen as one of the primary document for the Chinese to understand and spreading out within China and then to Japan about the teaching from Buddha. But somehow Bodhidharma's comment had implication to two major currents that may have taken place, the way I see it. One is Zen, and the other one is the Pure Land Sect, or Shin Buddhism. And the point of this is by studying the history and how the evolution of those spiritual pursuit has taken place, there was a maturity and clearer understanding of what it may mean for those who take a passage into the spiritual arena. And when I say spiritual, it sounds like something different, but I may have mentioned elsewhere. In Japanese religion, shukyo means the original teaching, the foundation of teaching. So living life without spiritual element is not following the fundamental teaching of religion or spiritual pursuit. And that ties to the discussion of two universes I've been talking about. The mind has a limitation, but there's something deeper, so to speak, the core of our being, related to how the law of universe manifested for us to evolve to use the mind. So the mind by itself doesn't exist, but with only the connection, only with the source of how things happen, has to be the way, and therefore this idea of the religion is connected to that, the basic teaching, and therefore our life has to have some connection to the basis. That's a strong word, but I think that's very important and meaningful if we are living life in a manner that is more holistic than just a part of the mind driving us to live our life. So back to Bodhidharma, his view had two elements. One is the understanding from the Buddha's teaching and practice in meditation mainly. And the other one is more related to the history of how we are built. So the second part has deeper understanding of how we are built in terms of the habitual patterns and imprinting process that may have happened from the ancestors to the next, and so on and so forth. And therefore the first part, which is called the renew, logic entering, and the second part is gyonyu, act entering. So that the logic is related to the brain activity, that has a limitation, but still you can digest the sutras and the teaching from the mind, the brain point of view, along with this meditation to go inward. But most important, perhaps, if I may say so, is not just depend on that, but the action-based, which is the one that I want to talk about. That's the second part, the gyonyu, act-based way of living the spiritual life. So that's Bodhidharma's way, and there are four elements within that act-based, and it's not so difficult to understand, so I'm going to go quickly. One is that whatever happens for us to be awakened, we need to address things that is based upon what the karma, whatever happened in the past. And their word for that is ho-ongyo, which is like depending upon the consequence of the difficulties and the karma happened in the past, has an element that we have to understand. And if I finish that one, because that's the main thing, the idea is such that if you have a suffering, just understand it's not just you or me in this case, suffering because of what I face, but rather based upon what happened in my life. I said somewhere, if you have a criminal nature, your parents may have had some criminal nature that was transferred without your knowing it when you're young, and therefore that's karma. And if not for the parents, that maybe the friend or ancestors of the parent have certain peculiar thing that may be built into your DNA or some behavior that may pass on when they're young from the ancestors to you or your father, and then your father to you, or from mother to you. So there's a reason for suffering which that you can address, but it may be beyond your karma. Like I said elsewhere, we can fix those bad habitual pattern by the concept of the repetition is mother of skill. And what it means is that by disciplining, for example, meditation or chanting or any other ways, you can address it, but there are issues that may go beyond, that may come from farther upstream or from our ancestors. So to realize it, it's not to avoid, or it's not to escape, or it's not to excuse yourself, but acknowledging it has a deeper dimension of the spiritual pursuit. I think the Eckhart Tolle talk about the pain body, not just individual having a pain body, which is like a negative mind habit. We may have, as a society or nation, have those, and certain characteristics that was inherited and shared as a value of the culture may have certain biased view, and that is the burden. One example may be the men versus women because of their different roles in life and so forth, that may have caused certain problems as a karma to overcome. And for example, this equality issue is one example of how we can overcome that we can fix those issues instead of being burdened. So that's the kind of example of the karma, the things that happen in the past can influence us. And therefore, one way you can think about it is that acknowledge that, not just to give up and be desperate, but know the cause and effect relationship, and also relating to nothingness I talked about, that is nullified if you can see that everything is just manifestation of the law of the universe, and whatever happened. There's no fundamental value, so to speak. It's at the end, it's just nothing. There's no foundation to it. If you realize that, and to realize that is a part of a training, and even the training may have the limitation, but acknowledging that is to let go of it as a way of releasing those karma-related issues. So that's the Ho-ongyo based upon the karma and the difficulties and the suffering that is caused by why this happened to me and why I'm so handicapped or any of that. The second is similar, but it's related to the Zui-engyo. En is like a karma too. The first one is more related to the Ho-ongyo. On is like, what's the English word? The sense of resentment. But the Zui-engyo, according to karma, has the same element. And the third one is that how to fix it. So that the second one is to acknowledge the cause and effect relationship again, related to the karma. And then the third one is not seek for it, is the way they define it, mushokugyo in Japanese. Don't seek for the solution as something you can gain, because it is beyond your... If you seek for it, you cannot find it. That's the easier way to put it. So when we have a caught up mind, we are looking for a way out, but the ones who has the understanding and connecting to the root is not showing, not pushing, not rushing, but according to the as it isness of what it is, and it's empty by itself at the end. Therefore, you don't look for something, but accept it. So that's the third one. And the fourth one is shohogyo, which is to realize that in essence, our nature can be seen as pure from the point of view of the nothingness, emptiness, no human value. It's just the way of nature, absolute way of what is happening, and it's beyond the human level of understanding, so that if we can connect to the clarity of who we are, meaning empty, vast emptiness. In other words, there's nothing caught up in our mind, and therefore there's no self, there's no ego. That's another way, the fourth way of Bodhidharma's teaching. So it took time to go through this, but it just tells you a rough idea of how the transmission of Dharma have taken place from India to China and then to Japan, and how it is transmitted one after the other and almost evolving to clearer understanding of what it is. So what I'm going to talk about is that if we can understand the karma, the hongyo, difficulties that is caused by the resentment and all the things that may have happened in the past, passed on to us, and we are bound by it, then what happens? From the point of view of Shin, that's the main part that I want to talk about, and related to Myokonin and the Shinran, or true Pure Land Buddhism, many words, but it's a very simple concept, which is if we realize the limitation of the mind and to realize the source of this law of universe manifesting, and if it is seen as, let's call it Amida Buddha, that's the analogy of Shin Buddhism, that the Amida Buddha came about to realize the people's suffering, and the Amida Buddha said that I would devote my whole existence to serve people who are suffering because of those karma or resentment, whatever happened in the past and accumulated that they cannot get out of it. But by Amida Buddha promising to himself that he will serve, and then the sutra goes that he is enlightened, because he promised if he doesn't serve people, he won't be enlightened. But he is enlightened, is how the sutra is structured. And what I'm talking about, how he's enlightened, is he's just representing the law of nature. It's just the absolute way that should happen, is happening, and that is how he is processing it. So the point of this teaching is that if you are the human being with some handicap as a human, with all the history of the negative mind habit, the karma and so forth, and you cannot get out of it, then just let go of yourself and let the Amida Buddha to take over, which is basically to say, let the law of nature to manifest. Because as a human being, given the condition what's given, there's nothing more can be done. So you let go, accept whatever the situation as it is, all the suffering, negativity, whatever the reason in the past may be accumulated in us, and you just say, Amida Buddha, I want you to take over me, which is basically to say other power, not your power, because your power is limited because of the karma, all the difficulties. So accept Amida Buddha or the law of nature to take over. It's like in Christianity, as an example, and all the religion has the same notion of the God to take over. So in this case, not to use the word God, but Amida Buddha or the law of nature to take over means you let go of yourself, because the law of nature is going to manifest, because that is the absolute force of the universe. That's how everything is happening. So you don't have to carry the burden of karma. Let it be. And say, Namu ami-da-butsu. I forgive myself for the vow of Amida Buddha to take over, to save us. So it's a very emotionally driven approach, not as much in the intellectual approach. And the intellect has some logic, reasoning, but that's within the mind framework. But this is, if I may say so, deeper, as if the parent relationship with the kids, and the kids have connection for those who help as parent. Of course, some kid may not have that relationship, but the ultimate parent, let's say, the God-like figure, Amida Buddha, law of nature to take over. It's not your fault. The fault is cured, because as much as the wound are cured by self-organizing force of nature, the same thing happens. Our mind suffering, the wound in our mind, beyond our knowledge coming from somewhere, coming out and have a pain, you don't have to have the pain by letting go of yourself, and that's the no self. So you're not using the mind anymore, you let go. And then you find there's no boundary, because the mind was creating the boundary between me, this person, thinking that it's all there is, and I have to figure out how to address it within what I can. But you let go of whatever I should or can in the mind, but empty out. Let the power of the universe take hold. So that's the point that I was talking, that even the Zen has the same element, that at the end, the turning point comes not from you, but you are gone, and that eruption, let's say, or the enlightenment take place. There's no boundary left anymore. So that's Zen approach, and Shin approach, or Shinran, and those sutras pointing the same. But from the more emotional point of view, that you relate to the Oyasama, Mr. or Mrs. Parent, Amida Buddha. I cannot do anything more with me to what I've got, so please take over. And there's a turning point once you let go of your ego and accept this force of the universe would make the whole transformation. And that's the spiritual or religious, the core teaching that we may not realize by the mind, but letting go of your mind, take off the boundaries between mind and what's out there, the force of the universe. Mind has the grab because that's how we are raised. You do this, you do that, you get better, you do this. But if you let go, that is counterintuitive, because that's what typically we learn a lot of how to navigate our life in a society. But when it comes to the core of a being, you may need to let go of that by having the other power, not your power. So there are people that I may want to come visit to verify or substantiate or show the transformation of their awakened way of living, not discriminating the suffering as bad, but to let the suffering to be taken over by the law of the universe, the source of who we are, or Amida Buddha. So there's appreciation of the pain relieved from this process by connecting to Amida Buddha or the law of nature. The mind cannot solve this problem. Let go of the mind, let the nature to take place. Counterintuitive? Is there any other choice? That's the awakening, the point of awakening that may be appreciative for those who has gone to the other shore, the other power to take over, and appreciate that we are alive. Not necessarily after death, but while we are on the earth, to be liberated. That's the point. Can we be empty out, let the things to happen as it should? The answer can come, perhaps only come from the other side. Thank you.